Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, I'm in the studio. We are live. Get involved in the chat and the comments. Loads to talk about. We're going to focus, right, on INEOS because there's like all these articles that have come out over the last sort of 24 hours, 48 hours about INEOS, about Ratcliffe, about Brailsford, about Dan Ashworth's sacking, about all these sort of moves that the owners or the part owners have been making and whether they're going to work. There's a big article in The Athletic about the plan under INEOS and is it going to have success and what is Dave Brailsford's role in all this and how has he managed to sort of become a key part of what seems to be the INEOS structure at Manchester United. So we're going to get into all that. So make sure you're joining in. Hit that like button if you've not done so already. And we'll have a little bit of a deep dive into what is going on, what these articles are saying, and just what the plan is. We hear about all this Mission 1 and Mission 21 and all the rest of it. We hear that Jim Ratcliffe is maybe a little bit more hands-on than we originally thought. We know that Dan Ashworth didn't work out. We're going to get into why that happened as well. So I just thought let's do it a little bit differently rather than just focusing on transfers and whatever else is going on and injuries and all that other stuff. Let's have a little bit of a deep dive into some of these articles we've seen and what exactly is going on with INEOS and what their plans are and how those plans are going to be successful. That's the question that all Manchester United fans will be asking themselves. Can INEOS turn this around? Because at the minute, it's been somewhat underwhelming, hasn't it? I mean, I know they've only been here for, about a year, but there's nothing where you go, oh, this is amazing. Look what they've done. Wow. Admittedly, you know, the inherited mess, it's going to take a while, but it's still a lot of the decisions they've made, a lot of the announcements, a lot of the moves they've made have been unpopular. I think it's pretty safe to say, unless you really love £66 tickets. So we'll get into all that. Make sure you're joining in as well. Heaven Soul, Mick Holohan, Natch is here, says Happy Friday. BMW Racing 1974 says we are floundering in a sea of despair. Morning, Jay. I like that. Akash K, Robert Taylor, Harry Potter, all the usual suspects. Thank you for joining in. Right, let's talk about this INEOS plan. Because, first of all, we've got an article here. I think this is in the Mirror now. This is originated in the Mail Plus, I think, which is behind a paywall. So we've got it here from the Mirror. And it says they've sort of picked out some bits from, I think it was Mike Keegan in the Mail, who spoke about INEOS and what they've been doing, the moves they've made. One of the points of the article was about Dan Ashworth and his acts and why he got sacked. You can see Manchester United axed Dan Ashworth after just 5 months at the club due to concerns over his ability to get things done. Now, we kind of know a little bit about this anyway, but it's sort of come to the fore when the recent financial reports have come out and it's like how much we spent on hiring and firing Dan Ashworth seems like a bit of a shambles. So there's been a little bit more noise around that decision and how it came about and what exactly led to it. So it says here, the figure that covers compensation paid to Newcastle and the payoff Ashworth received when he left Old Trafford, it's now emerged that United decided to pull the trigger after realising his football knowledge was not what they had hoped for. According to the Daily Mail, the Red Devils failed to do enough due diligence on Ashworth. The report adds that new co-owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe wanted to bring in British expertise, but Ashworth's perspective was seen as very UK focused. Now look at that. There's a sentence that makes zero sense. The report adds that new co-owner Jim Ratcliffe wanted to bring in British expertise, but Ashworth's perspective was seen as very UK focused. Now, unless I'm missing something, are Britain and the UK not one and the same? It's like we wanted to bring in British expertise, but he was a bit too British. I get what they're saying here. What they're trying to say is that he wasn't sort of embracing or looking further afield than Britain. We know about this with his suggestions for a successor to Erik ten Hag. We heard that Thomas Frank was top of his list. There's even reports that he actually quite liked Gareth Southgate, which has sent everyone into a sort of anti-Ashworth frenzy. However, one of the interesting things about the Mail Plus article, and it's picked up on here in the Mirror, was Brailsford's involvement in all this. And it seems that Brailsford pushed for Dan Ashworth. You can get rid of that now. Brailsford pushed for Dan Ashworth because he felt he knew Dan Ashworth, they'd worked together before, and he felt he was someone that could come into Manchester United and sort of almost run the footballing side of things. Now, strangely enough, from when I'm reading this Mail article, it seems to indicate that despite that misstep, and it was a big misstep, a costly misstep, Brailsford's emerged from this sort of unscathed in the eyes of Sir Jim Ratcliffe. So even though he was the one who was pushing for Dan Ashworth, and Dan Ashworth's tenure at United was a bit of a disaster, really. I don't really didn't do much that was disastrous, but the fact that you brought him in, spent a load of money on him, and he's gone within a few months, that is pretty disastrous. However, it doesn't seem to have affected Brailsford standing with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Sir Jim Ratcliffe seems to still think Dave Brailsford is the guy. He's the right man to sort of to lead United forward, if you will. And he's, if anything, he's sort of got more responsibilities than he had previously in the wake of the Dan Ashworth debacle, which is a little bit surprising because you think something like that might end up costing you, not your job, but it might end up people start questioning you. But apparently not. One of the interesting things with the Mail Plus article as well is it spoke about how that the result against Manchester City in the FA Cup final, that led to sort of Ten Hag keeping his job, basically. And one thing I didn't like is Mike Keegan said, but against the odds, and but against the odds, and thanks in no small part to a City defensive blunder, the ribbons on the trophy were red and not blue. Like, yes, City made a mistake in defence, but United played very well in the cup final. You can think Erik Ten Hag wasn't the right man for the job, but I am not having it was just because of a City mistake that United lifted the trophy. We were the better team on the day, and I know even a lot of City fans will admit that. So we deserved the win. We deserved that trophy. It wasn't it wasn't lucky or anything like that, which is what's been implied there. But, however, winning that trophy definitely seemed to move the sort of sentiment towards keeping Erik Ten Hag. A lot of that was fan-driven. I wanted to keep Erik Ten Hag. I'm a fan. I was at Wembley. I was buzzing. It was interesting, though. I was near where I was sat in the posh bit. And I was sat near some of the execs and stuff. And they didn't look happy at the end of that final. They looked a bit shell-shocked. And I wonder whether that was because they knew they had a tough decision to make. And not the disappointed that Manchester United had won or anything like that. But when it was like, right, we've won the FA Cup. Okay, what do we do now? Can we sack a manager who's just delivered his second trophy in 2 years, especially one who's just delivered an FA Cup win over Manchester City, stopping them doing the double? It certainly seemed like there wasn't the jubilation and euphoria you'd expect from people associated with the club who just lifted the FA Cup. So, quite interesting, this article, because in the Mail, it goes into a lot of the sort of, as a look at what Brailsford's involvement is. And there's another article as well. I think is it The Athletic? Who are also speaking about this. I think this has come out today. This is Oliver Kay, Adam Crafton and Laurie Whitwell. I think we've had Adam on the channel. Adam Crafton's been coming on Full-Time Devils, and we've had him on Stretford Paddock as well for quite a few years. I didn't realise how he first made his appearance on Devils years ago. Laurie Whitwell, of course, who does Inside United with us. So they've had a little bit of a look at this, and you can see the tweet there. So Dave Brailsford launched Mission 21 and Mission 1 to focus minds on Manchester United winning a 21st men's and first Women's Super League title. But can the increased role of a culture marginal gains expert really revive a dysfunctional football club? Now, what this is talking about here, I was reading this morning, is obviously Dave Brailsford's come in from a cycling background. He was at Team Sky. INEOS took over Team Sky, and he was, he sort of was the guy there that brought all this success at Team Sky with cycling. And I think the plan was within 5 years to get a British cyclist to win the Tour de France, and they achieved that. Now, with marginal gains, it was like, if you increase 1% of so many different facets of cycling, for example, you improve even things like this is I'm not just making this up. I think this mentions in the article. Even things like the kit they wear, stuff like that. Even if it's a better outfit and the tyres are a bit better or whatever, the bike's a bit better, the cyclist himself, even stuff, right? And I'm not making this up. I read this in the article. Even stuff like someone peeling their bananas for them was a thing that was like to save their energy. Honestly, I read it and I was like, what, really? But it's all these like little things. And if there's like loads of these different little things you're making a 1% gain on, that all adds up to a big improvement. And then you can go and win things. Now, does that ethos work at Manchester United? Does it work in football? I think it can do. But I always think with this marginal gains thing, I understand it. Improving, yeah, even if it is 1%, you want to be moving forward, you want to be improving. But I think that helps when you've got a high standard anyway, and then you can increase it to these marginal gains that can maybe be the difference between finishing second and finishing first in the Premier League. Maybe that can be the difference between losing a Champions League final and winning one. We know it can be fine margins. We all talk about fine margins in football. You look at some of Manchester United's Champions League wins. Every single Champions League win there's been a fine margin element to it. You look at 68, if you want to go back to the European Cup, went to extra time. If Alex Stepney doesn't save from Eusebio in the last minute, Benfica lift the European Cup. Fine margin. 99. What? We go into the 90th minute, we're 1-0 down. Obviously, fine margins there. If Ryan Giggs doesn't do that shot, which isn't quite where it wants to be, do we get that equaliser and do we go on to win it? Oh wait, if John Terry don't slip and miss his penalty, do Manchester United win the Champions League? No, we don't. Chelsea do. So I get the idea of fine margins and marginal games, but I always think that is something that you should be focusing on when you've got a pretty good base. I think the problem we've got at Manchester United, for me anyway, and you may disagree, and I'm going to get in some comments in a minute, is that we're at such a low base. It's like we need to sort out the big things. Never mind these 1% improvements. We need to make big improvements in the squad, in the culture of the club, in almost everything. Because at the minute, we're sat in 15th, and I don't think 1% gains is going to fix that. Let me know what you think. Joshua Bowater says, hypothetical question for you in the chat, Jay. Would you accept no signings until summer 2026 if it meant the debt was cleared in full? The only issue I've got with that, and I understand that because a recent article and recent financial report shows that we're still £1 billion in debt, which is disgusting, but that's where we're at. I get the question. I think it is a valid one. My only issue with that is, are you going to then start having to play youngsters who might not be ready to play as many minutes as you need? That's the worry if you do something like that. If the club was to go, look, we need to clear this debt. The club's a mess. We can't do anything until we get rid of this debt. We're not making any signings. We're just going to have to use the academy, use the players we've got. Then you're going to end up potentially ruining some players' careers because you're going to be throwing in youngsters who might not be ready, who might not be quite up to the standard you need, but because you've not made any signings, you're going to have to become over-reliant on them. That's my worry with something like that. United should be able to make transfers. I know we're sailing close to a win with PSR, and I think because of the recent financial reports, it showed that we're only just sort of under that limit of not breaking PSR rules. But I don't think that not making any signings for a year or two is going to be the answer. And I don't think anyone would stomach that. But let me know what you think. Kevin says, they chucked millions into technology. That helped and possibly pushed chemical use to the edge of the laws. On the technology front as well, we know that there's been redevelopments at Carrington. Technology and data is going to be a big part of that as well. So that might help improve things at Manchester United. And again, I want to see us improve. I like the idea of, moving forward. It needs to be a bit more than just 1% gains. Kevin Aitchen says, feel like nothing will fully improve so long as the yoke of the Glazers is still hanging around our neck. Yeah, I mean, we need to get the Glazers gone, don't we? It's just, they've almost ruined the club fully, haven't they? They've just been a complete and utter disaster for Manchester United. Gerard777 says, we can moan about the Glazers and INEOS all we like, but if there is one thing we can do to help, it's to stop this nonsense of applying pressure to sack managers. Amorim needs time. I agree with that. Amorim does need time. BRY with the most ridiculous comment I've ever seen. Glazers are decent. They have allowed United to invest. They're not decent, and they haven't allowed United to invest at all. They've put us £1 billion into debt. They've not spent any of their own money on the club. And Manchester United have never really pushed the envelope like we should have done when we have got to getting close to a title challenge, when we have finished second or whatever. The following summer, we've not really spent the money we should have done to move forward and to try and push for a title where other clubs have, which is why they're winning titles and we haven't won one since Sir Alex Ferguson retired. Let's talk about the debt. Let's talk about the transfer debt. Here you go. This is going to, put a smile on your face. This is our mate, Mark Critchley, who's been on the channel. Manchester United's outstanding transfer debt stood at $300 million at the end of the second quarter. The club's latest financial results have revealed United's transfer debt is separate from the 731 million quid's worth of financial debt on the club's books, the majority of which relates to the Glazer family's controversial leverage buyout in 2005. Combined, the figures total more than $1 billion. There you go. 731 million quid's worth of financial debt, the majority of which relates to the Glazer family's takeover of Manchester United. We have paid 730 million quid, or thereabouts, to have the Glazers own us. So if anyone thinks the Glazers have been anything other than awful for Manchester United, I've got some magic beans to sell you. Goes on to say, United recorded losses totaling 373 million over the last 5 years, which has led Sir Jim Ratcliffe to embark upon a range of cost-cutting measures since taking control of operations at Old Trafford last year. We're going to talk about these cost-cutting measures as well. There was an article, I think, by James Ducker in the Telegraph. So it says here, inside Ratcliffe's brutal first year at Manchester United, counting screws, I'm not talking about prison, I'm talking about actual screws, sending back sellotape and smaller food portions. That's not a joke. He's being serious. I was reading this article and it says things like people were putting in stationary orders for sellotape and getting told that ain't happening. Sellotape. Yeah? and also in the canteen, smaller food portions, plus a culture of fear. And then there was a call to Kath Phipps's next of kin regarding, I think, their tickets. I think in the end that was put down to a mistake. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Also, not recognising Katie Zellum. Apparently, Sir Jim Ratcliffe asked her who she was and what she did. Yeah, I mean, fears of more job cuts as well and a spy in a camp. I mean, it's not exactly, you know, an article designed to put a smile on your face unless you don't support Manchester United, which you're probably loving it. So you can see that we are a complete mess at the minute. I mean, financially we're a mess. These cost-cutting measures, they're almost comical, but this seems to be where we're at. You've got Dave Brailsford, who seems to have a lot of control, a lot of influence over the club at the minute. Can that transfer what he knows and what he's done at cycling and his marginal gains? Can that transfer to success at Manchester United? I'm not so sure. I don't know. I'm a bit sceptical, I'll be honest with you. I'm always a bit wary of just how transferable skills are. I don't think you can just go, well, he's had success at cycling, so he can have success at football. Football is obviously completely different. There are so many different sort of things to consider when you're handling a football team that you don't have to consider when you handle a cycling team. I know it is a cycling team, but ultimately it's an individual who's on that bike. I know there's more than one person in the team, but football is so different. There's so much more publicity that comes with being in a football team. There's more of a team ethos as well. Plus, you're coming into a situation where Manchester United are miles behind where we need to be, miles behind our rivals. Plus, you've got the finances involved. The finances involved in football are just astronomically bigger than what is involved in cycling as well. So there's all these different elements to take into consideration. I'm not sure it's going to work with Dave Brailsford. I think as well, he's kind of got away with it with the Dan Ashworth thing. From reading that article, it's mad that it just seems to be like, oh, well, he got that one wrong. Never mind, c'est la vie. We'll see, though. We will see. Let me know what you think. OG McFall says, what do you expect from a billionaire? He couldn't give two FUCKs about our beautiful club, all about his legacy. Can those two things sort of help Manchester United have success eventually, though? If he doesn't care about Manchester United, he only cares about his legacy, would those two things not be tied together? If his legacy is going to be ruining Manchester United, that ain't a good legacy. So if his legacy is going to be the man that saved Manchester United, then we're happy as United fans and he can be happy about his legacy. So if he is just concerned about his legacy, then he should want to fix United. Even if he doesn't care about United, if he cares about how he's perceived and his legacy, then he should want to fix this club, which is what I thought he was about. We spoke to Kieran Maguire a few years ago and he said, look, keep your hands in Ratcliffe. This is a guy who, you know, is a United fan, he's getting on a bit, he'd be thinking about his legacy, and if he can be the man that rescues United, that'd be a great legacy. At the minute, those decisions are being very unpopular. But, and I think it mentions this in one of the articles I've read, forgive me, I'm forgetting which one, because I've read about 5 articles this morning. It's going to take a few years, but the plan is to get Manchester United back to the top. That is what all this is about. It's just, it's difficult to stomach at the minute. Kenny says, you know what never gets talked about? The Glazers own Carrington separate to Man United. The club rents Carrington from the Glazers property group. That's an interesting one, that. We know that, I think part of the money that Sir Jim Ratcliffe spent on buying his share in Manchester United went into Carrington. That is being redeveloped. The problem you've got is the stadium isn't, you know, we don't know what's going to happen in the stadium. We're guessing, or we hear there's going to be either redevelopment or rebuilding the stadium. We don't know what that's going to look like just yet. And the squad. The squad is the massive issue at Manchester United. I know there's lots of other ones, but the squad is so far behind where it needs to be. It's shocking. Nathan Sayers says, Brailsford is a chancer. What's he done since the 2012 Olympics? Tobias Shale says, Glazer out, Qatar in. We've been through this with the whole Sheikh Jassim thing. It ain't happening. It didn't happen when it could have happened. It ain't going to happen now. I'll tell you, I don't like sticking my neck out on many things, but I'll stick my neck out and say that Qatar and Sheikh Jassim ain't going to buy Manchester United anytime soon. I just don't see it happening. Akash K says, Jay, have you read the Bloomberg piece on United debt this morning on potentially the debt interest will become 7% post 2027? I haven't. I will try and read that. I've read a lot of articles this morning. That is one that I haven't read, but I will try and have a look at it. Skibby Danger says, Sheikh Jassim is football Santa Claus. Santa Claus is real, though. Let's talk about the Katie Zellum point that I mentioned there. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. There's an article here in the start. It says, Sir Jim Ratcliffe asked Manchester United captain Katie Zellum what she did. I think we can be honest here, can't we? I don't care what we see about Project or Mission 1 for the United Women to win the Super League. I think it's safe to say Sir Jim Ratcliffe doesn't view the women's team as a priority. I think he mentioned this in his interview with Andy Mitten for United We Stand. I think there was an element of that. That's not a priority for him. I think I think we can see it. And the fact that he doesn't know who Katie Zellum is feeds into that idea, doesn't it? His priority is the men's team. Now, for me, I've said this, as soon as the Manchester United women's team was restarted again, if we're going to have a women's team, we should do it properly. Any team that represents Manchester United as a part of our club should be done well. And I want us to have a good women's team. I've got 2 daughters. One of it, both have played football. One still plays football now. They get inspired by seeing other girls and women playing for Manchester United and playing well for Manchester United. I've taken my kids and my family to go and watch the women's team. You want to have a women's team that is competing and winning trophies, yeah? It's a nonsense that we can't do that. A club the size of Manchester United should be able to do that. Why are we not doing it? What's the reason? You don't need to spend and invest anything like the amount of money on the women's team that you do on a men's team to have success. You just need to spend a bit more than we are doing. And it saddens me that it's become an afterthought, if that. And I don't care what his Mission 1 thing says. It's obvious that INEOS don't view it as a priority. But you can have your cake and eat it. You can push the men's team. You can spend money on that. You can invest it in the right way. And you can also push the envelope when it comes to the women's team too. And Manchester United should have a good competing women's team. And it saddens me that that doesn't seem to be the case. Let me know what you think. Kenny says, a few women's team are turning a profit. I think Arsenal is. Yeah, there you go. If there's profit to be made, I'm sure INEOS will be all over that. It just saddens me. Talking about changes, Jackie Kay. Manchester United confirmed departure of brilliant staff member after 29 years at Old Trafford. Another long-serving member of staff is leaving Man United. Obviously, in the Manchester Evening News here, says Jackie Kay. Manchester United have confirmed Jackie Kay is leaving the club as part of the ongoing restructure. Kay has worked at Old Trafford for almost 30 years, and she has spent the last 9 years in the role of head of team operations, which has involved overseeing first team logistics. Kay, David Gill's former personal assistant, joined United in 1995, and she subsequently moved to Carrington, where she served a succession of men's managers in different roles. Someone who worked with Kay at United told the Evening News her departure was a big move from the club, and she was described as brilliant by Ashley Young in 2015. A United spokesperson says, as part of the ongoing restructure of our operations, Jackie Kay is leaving Manchester United after almost 30 years of outstanding service to the club. So I've seen a few people in my group chats chatting about this, a few people who obviously well respected, well thought of at the club. Wish her well. Big changes just from top to bottom going on at Manchester United, really. And, it's all well and good if it works. If you see some success from it. One of the articles I read said it might take 10 years. 10 years, man, for this all to come to fruition. Jesus wept. Let's talk about Paul Pogba. We've not spoken about him for a week. Former Manchester United I can't cope. Do you know how many times we've had this? Do you know how many times we've had this part of this sentence? Forget the former. Manchester United star Paul Pogba drops cryptic one-word message amid transfer speculation. We had that back in 2017, 18, 19, 20, whatever. And now we've got it again. What's he said? What's the cryptic message? Do we know? Oh, yeah. In a post on Instagram, Pogba wrote, patience. People are getting on the Pogba bus, though, aren't they? People are looking at it going, he's available in March. We can bring him in. Would it be better off having him in the squad than not having him in the squad? I'm going to stick to my guns and say, no, I don't think we should bring back Paul Pogba. But you may disagree. What happens at Man United, right? This happens all the time, post-Fergie, right? United are here, right? We get linked with a player who's here for whatever reason. And people go, we don't want him, he ain't good enough, we can't get him. And then United go down here, like this. And then we get to the point where you go, bring that player in. Now we need him. And I feel like that's what's happening at United at the minute, where a few weeks ago you would have gone, even a month or so, you would have gone, Paul Pogba, now we don't need to bring him back. But then as the results keep getting worse, you go, actually, and we haven't made any, other than Dorgu in heaven, we haven't brought in any attacking players anyway in the January transfer window. In fact, 2 have gone out the door. You go, okay, maybe someone like Paul Pogba could come in and maybe play in one of those 10 roles or maybe play midfield. I think it's a bad idea. Let me know what you think. Liam Cohen says journalism is dead. Stephanie Griffith says crossword clues, laughing emoji. Harry Potter says pa ha ha ha. Patience. People are deluded. Colin Coupleditch says when he plays, Pogba is great, but he's always blooming injured, and the media circus around him is just not worth it. Akbar Mia says Jay, I'd love to come on a show. Any chance that can happen? Send us a score prediction. Yep, to paddockmatchday@gmail.com for the Everton game or for any upcoming game. 30 seconds, film yourself like that in landscape. Send it to paddockmatchday@gmail.com. We'll use that as part of our pre-match build-up on the watch-along. And then if if we like what we see and think you've got something about you, then you can always get on the channel, whether that's coming here in the studio or maybe contributing in other ways. But this is a fan channel and we do get fans on it. Tyler, who you send us, or still send us score predictions. She's been joining me on a few of the previews. It happens. Joe Smith did a fan cam, yeah, and now look at him. Big Dog says Angel Gomez plays really good football and available on a free transfer in the summer. Sensible and worthy signing for Man United. We spoke about this the other day, and I think there was an article where it listed the players that are available on a free transfer. Players like Jonathan Tah, Angel Gomez, Joshua Kimmich. I like Angel Gomez. I liked him when he was at United in the academy. Is he the answer to our problems? I'm not so sure. He's a good midfielder. And let's face facts, it's not like we're exactly overrun with good players at the minute. I'm just not sure he's the right type of midfielder. I'm not trying to sit on the fence here. I think he's one of those players, though. If Gomez returned to Manchester United, people would be happy with that. But if we don't get him, I think we shouldn't really lose our minds about that. Just finally, let's talk about the Europa League. So, in terms of where United can end up or who we've got next, is it either Alkmaar or Sociedad for United, isn't it? Yeah. And we could end up with Spurs in the final, couldn't we? We know that anyway. But we'll have to wait and see if we get there. Road to Bilbao. So, could we play Spurs in the final? It could be Spurs in the final, couldn't it? Yeah. Listen, I think we can win the Europa League. I know we're not very good at the minute, but I still think we're capable of winning the Europa League. And I still think that, no disrespect to some of them teams in there, and this may be, this may end up getting clips up and rammed down my throat, but they're all beatable. We're beatable, but so are they. So it's doable, right? We could win the Europa League, and that would be amazing. Imagine it. Manchester United finish 15th and end up in the Champions League. I don't care how shameless it is. I think we should have a parade with that Europa League trophy. Seriously. Wouldn't it be mint as well if City finished like 6th and didn't get in the Champions League? I mean, I'm clutching at straws here, but you never know. We can dream. That's the dream, innit? United winning the Europa League and City finishing 6th. Jesus Christ. I'm going to leave it there before I depress myself any further. We're going to have the preview later on. I think it's Academy Scoops joining me for that one. Finn. So we'll chat about some of the youngsters that could be playing this weekend against Everton. Obviously, we're going to hear from the manager, got his press conference, so we'll talk about what he said as well. Plus, we'll have the brew later on. I think we've got a guest for that one. So if you're not doing so, make sure you are hitting like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jay. This has been the Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.